Hello and welcome to another episode of Interwoven, the podcast from the Weave. I'm Adam Roxby and I'm glad you could be here. We've got some great conversations lined up for you in this episode. We start with the conversation I had with Jamie Lumsden, who's a life coach working in this region as well as online. James had a conversation with Tom, a graphics expert, and we finish with a conversation James had with accountant Peter Disney. So let's get started with a sit down that I had with Jamie. So welcome, Jamie, to the podcast. Jamie is a life coach operating just over the border in Suffolk, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what a life coach is and how he goes about running his business. Most people, they've probably heard of counselling and therapy and meditation and these sort of mindfulness things, but what is a life coach and how does it differ from sort of other forms of help that people might get?
Thank you, Adam. So a life coach does for the mind perhaps what a PT would do for the body. So we help people with emotional fitness and emotional health, mental health, well-being. And how is it different from counselling? Well, it's different from counselling in the sense that a counsellor would perhaps work from past to present, whereas a life coach may work with present to future. Creating goals, setting plans and actions, and working with the client on a sort of one-to-one basis to get them to exactly where they want to be. And those achievements, those goals are usually set out at the beginning of the work with a life coach.
Okay, so, and you've also trained in counselling. Do you find is there a way in which that sort of training crosses over? I mean, you don't have to be a counsellor to be a life coach, but do you find that that's something which you do differently?
I think naturally, a natural progression from counselling into life coaching seems to be what I've seen in my business over the last 3 years. It seems to be that many people will have counselling to deal with past issues or childhood traumas, and undoing the behaviours relating to those in adulthood. And when a client is finished with their counsellors, they talk about it, they learn about themselves, but the number one question you always get is, what do they do next? Where do they take these new learnings? How do we implement these new learnings? So it kind of follows on from counselling, but it is different. It is fundamentally different. But it does work well for someone who's looking to move on to the next steps of their lives, creating a new normal, changing aspects of their careers, their businesses, their home lives, their communication. There's various ways in which that can be done.
Yeah, because I see from my perspective as somebody who's been a nurse for about 10 years, is that you see a lot of people talking about counselling being beneficial, but quite often they say that it's only beneficial for the time that they're doing it, and they find a difficulty in getting sustained benefit from it. Maybe, as you say, it sort of addresses an issue that they've got or a trauma that they've experienced, and then, as you say, creating a new normal from that and building a life or a series of habits that's beneficial for them in the long term is something I think that they struggle with. So they might, feel better for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months afterwards, but then they can slip back into their old habits.
I think very much that determines on what kind of therapy you're doing, because there's so many different types of counselling. With coaching, it's more about bringing it into the present moment. It's more about working with the now rather than the past, and maybe more the future. But really, learning how to use those uncovered skills and work towards your talents. And uncovering a newfound confidence allows people to move forward from trauma. It allows them to put a gap between past, present, and future. Whereas someone who is completely traumatized tends to live completely in the past. So they may see a counsellor for that, just to bring them into the present moment. And yes, that doesn't sound very exciting, but it can be essential building blocks, essential foundations for people to be able to gain confidence, to be able to start looking at higher levels of needs.
What's the most sort of common thing that people come to a life coach for? Is it a sort of a general, undefinable, not happy with how their life is at the moment, or are they planning for something in particular, like trying to reach a goal, or?
Definitely all of those things. People come to me specifically because they're looking to change areas of their lives, improve their relationships, improve their mental health, stop procrastination, improve confidence, and just generally improve their emotional well-being and emotional health. So people will come to me generally from a minimum of sort of 12 weeks, and I have had clients who stay with me for 3 years because they just like to be held accountable each week for their goals. And I get people from all different walks of life, and I coach all over the world as well. So there's no specific demographic I work with, no specific age range. I don't tend to work with children because they don't really need life coaches at that age, but generally I work with people all over from all different walks of life.
Is there a difference in the sort of demographics or locations of people as to what different problems that they're having, or do you find it's a fairly universal?
I would say it's actually surprisingly well balanced between male and female. And again, in terms of ages, it's, if I see a client who's 18 to maybe 22, 23, you'll probably find that a parent has pushed them into life coaching or guided them towards someone like myself. And from the ages of sort of 24 to say 35, you get, people who want to do better in careers, first time relationships. And then people who are the later stages, like from 35 plus, you've got people who are mostly focused on grounding themselves, getting themselves or healing from previous versions of themselves and trying to do better than they were in their past lives, if you like. The past 10 years, they might have been in unhappy relationships, they may have been in unhappy jobs, or just in a place of feeling stuck in their lives. So they'll kind of hire a coach or hire someone like me to get them out of that and to get them into something else. I don't just tell them what to do, I make sure they do it whilst they're with me. That's the difference.
I mean, a lot of the people who listen to our podcasts are entrepreneurs or people who are working day to day in a business setting. And the biggest problem that we sort of find that when people talk to us is that they spend a lot of time working in their business rather than working on their business. So they're sort of at the coalface doing all these sort of things and have great difficulty in finding perspective. Is there some sort of advice that you can give to some people who are like that, who are just so focused on the day-to-day that they have difficulty getting a sense of perspective, or even procrastination?
Yeah, I mean, people who work in their business rather than on it are the ones who are likely to feel burnout. Getting to that stage is so difficult because you can go into burnout without even really knowing it until it's too late. It's really prevention rather than cure. It's like, well, actually, what do I need to do to not burn out? What do I need to do to be able to sustain what I'm doing right now, to sustain any success or let go of any failure? It's a question-based exercise where you explore if different areas of your business, different areas of your home life, they do intertwine, no matter what anybody says. Business and home, they just don't sit separately like they used to. People work from home now. The changes are massive. How we look after ourselves in terms of business, how we look after our mental health, physical health, has to change, has to adapt. We can't do the same things we did before because it's just not the working. Business just doesn't work the same as it used to. The boundaries are different. What we tend to do is we tend to treat the same problem the same way without looking at how anything else has changed. So it's like we're making the same recipe, but the temperature's different every time. So really, we got to just take a step back and analyze. Any individual circumstance can be analyzed by stepping back, having a look at where you are in your own life, because no one manual for doing business. There's no one manual for doing life. We all have to find what works for us as individuals. We all want different things. So really, we've got to put down the textbooks and ask ourselves what it is that matters to us. Why are we doing the business? What's the point of doing it if it's not giving you what you want? I'd speak to many business owners who work 7 days a week, and you ask them, well, why do you work 7 days a week? And they were like, well, I don't know. And do you need to work 7 days a week? Well, no, but I feel like if I don't, I will lose the business. But you've just contradicted yourself by saying you don't need to. but the psychology says that you do. And there's always general conflicting information when it comes to business owners. They all have this level of toxic resilience. I must work 7 days a week. I must never take a day off sick. That level of toxic resilience leads to burnout. When people do not self-care, they burn out. No professional business owner has ever burnt the candle at both ends for a long time and had a success of it. Everyone learns in the end that actually you must look after your own needs before your business needs, because without you, there isn't a business.
Putting on your own oxygen mask in an emergency.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Learning more about how we use resilience in our lives, how we use self-care, can really define how long a business can last.
How did you get to be where you are now then, in the sense of you've had quite a few different careers in the past and still got your finger in a few pies?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unusual combination. I mean, I started life as a chef, and I sort of did about 15 years worth of full-time cooking. But I always had an interest, my own experiences with mental health. I struggled when I was young. And I went on my own sort of mental health journey and kind of learnt a lot that way by seeing therapists and coaches and being on and off medication in and out of the mental health system as well. So whilst working as a chef, it kind of felt like, it was a perfect place for mental health to manifest itself. And really, it really got a grip of me while I was there. And I had to learn about myself to be able to help myself out of that situation, because it was really quite daunting at times. And I realised at that point, once I was, helping myself a little bit, that actually there was a real problem in hospitality with mental health. So I became an early advocate for mental health within hospitality. So I went on a number of different journeys from that. But that's how life coaching became part of my life, is because I was a chef, struggling with mental health, and I went down the road of learning how to be a counsellor. I originally wanted to just coach chefs, how to look after yourself whilst you're a chef, because it's one of those industries, rampant toxic resilience. Everybody's got this terrible attitude towards not looking after themselves. It was very much an environment which was, kind of bravery was to come into work when you were ill, or just a lot of toxic masculinity, because it was a very heavily male-dominated environment. I think it's the second or third highest rate of suicide in any profession. And I can see why as well. The quality of life was just terrible. For me, the way out of that was becoming a sort of chef's mentor, if you like. And, I reached out and I got featured in a couple of big magazines talking about mental health within hospitality. I featured on the BBC on the One Show, and that was a real great exposure for the stuff we were trying to do. And then it led me to start and finish a small mental health charity for men. And during that time, I realised that actually my skill set could be used in a much broader sense, and potentially could turn into a small and independent and fairly local and international business. Local in person and international online, which I never thought would be possible.
Now you've got the ability to sort of remove the barriers of location and time through technology, and I think people have obviously become a lot more confident with that since the pandemic. Lots of people transitioning to working from home, and in many cases staying there. We often find, as we talk to businesses, especially ones that are so heavily predicated on people's individual skills and talents, is there a difference, or is there an anxiety about how you can sustain that business, in the sense of it's all down to you? And that may be very powerful in one sense, but it's also, I imagine, at some points could cause a bit of anxiety.
In my first year of business, those were the main anxieties, absolutely. I was terrified to take a day off. If I take a holiday, I'm going to come back and I'm going to have no clients at the end of it. They're all going to just disappear for some reason. I kind of led myself into an early burnout with that. I didn't just stop cooking and then start coaching. I had 2 clients when I stopped cooking, which was never going to be enough to even pay an electricity bill. So I took a job as a delivery driver, and this was mid-pandemic. I was delivering Amazon parcels and then coming home and doing a couple of clients, and then probably going back out in the evening to deliver food. I did food deliveries for Uber. I did that for about a year, just because whilst the coaching business was building up and the clients were getting there, I really, really, really panicked that actually I would never be able to sustain this as a business on its own. But after a year, it just almost felt suddenly got busier and busier, and the word of mouth thing came around, and people started to get an idea as to who I was and who I would see, and so locally I was getting quite popular. And then the clients just came in. I'm not a big fan of marketing. Even now, I don't market it myself really at all. I have a social media page and I post on it probably once or twice a month. But it was a long, slow process to try and build up to a point where word of mouth seems to be enough to sustain my business now. And this is my fourth year of business. At this point, I am getting more comfortable to take holidays, have time off, and, indulge myself in other activities as well. I still do, private cooking, various other projects. So being self-employed, yes, it has its drawbacks, of course, but actually it offers so much freedom once you get to a level where you're comfortable enough to allow yourself just to let it flow rather than control it.
Are you one of these people that sort of has big plans for the future in the sense of what you want your business to look like, or are you kind of happy with how you are at the moment and just trying to keep that level of intensity?
I think it's a slow building process for me. I don't want any overnight transformations at all. I quite like to organically grow my business. I very much believe in word of mouth. I like having a good reputation. I like working locally, but I also like working online as well. So what it is now, if it didn't change and it was always like it is now, I'd be very happy. But if it gets better, which I'm sure it will, get busier, then I'm very happy. I'm making sure that I'm in a position where I'm happy either way. Would I want less clients? Probably not. Would I want more? Probably. Am I happy where I am? Absolutely. That's the most important thing to me.
So you're not sort of thinking of the Jamie Lumsden brand in the sense of having different people coming in to sort of help you do some of the things that you don't enjoy doing, like admin or that sort of thing?
Potentially, if it got busy enough. I mean, my level of admin in my job right now is fairly minimal anyway. I have an accountant who does all my payments, my books, everything like that. And that's absolutely fine. That takes a lot of pressure off of me. The level of admin or anything like that is very minimal. It's very much a business that looks after itself.
I suppose there's another thing that people need to think about. I know quite a lot of these independent people that we've spoken to have desires to go bigger and bigger and start to think about, okay, well, if I'm a marketing professional, then I've reached the limit of my own ability to have clients, so I need to get more people in. That's a good pathway for some people, but your example is that if you're happy with where you are and the level of energy and level of work that you're doing, it can be okay just to say that you're happy where you are and you don't have aspirations to turn yourself into a sort of employer of other people.
I mean, that definitely could change, but right now I try and stay in the moment with it. I don't want to overwhelm myself with grandeur or big plans to do things that, might never materialize. What I'm happy to do is progressively climb. My business is definitely not regressing. It's definitely progressing and it's definitely slow. I'm pretty comfortable with that and I'm pretty happy about that. It allows me to get it right the first time rather than having to make endless mistakes to climb. I'm just progressing and learning as I go. At the moment, I'm a sole practitioner, and actually, I don't think anyone else can do what I do in the way that I do it because no one's had my experience, no one's had my upbringing, no one's got my personality, or, I like what I do, and I'm not looking to replicate that in any way, And I have my clientele who I like to work with, and my prices reflect the kind of people I work with at the moment, and that's normal working class people. Should that ever change? Then it will change. I'll just grow with the needs of the business and the needs of myself.
Is that also something that's quite important, is that your upbringing and the experiences that you've had have given you some insight into the problems that people come to you with?
100%. The number one thing that makes me a good coach is being relatable. It's being able to sit there and say to a client, well, this is not about me. This is not my session. It's your session. But actually, if it's beneficial to you to share my experiences, then I will. And that breaks down enormous barriers. It allows my clients to trust me so much more because it's not a process of them just constantly talking about themselves and feeling like they're not getting anything back or reciprocated. It's about creating a relationship of trust. And by letting a few things out of your own personal experience, it really helps the client to relax. It really helps them to feel human. It helps them to feel less isolated when they're coming to speak to a life coach. And I think the same for counsellors as well. They're so tied by boundaries and by many, many rules and legislations that actually they're afraid to be human beings, and they end up very, very hard to trust because they don't feel like they're talking to a human being anymore. They kind of take that personal approach away because of fear of getting it wrong or fear of breaking the rules. But, with life coaching, it's a little bit more liberal. We can do pretty much whatever is appropriate to the needs of the client.
I suppose with counselling, they've got the sort of the educational background and the experience of being trained in that sense, but being able to relate and share their own life experiences, especially as if I think back to my nursing as well, we try and do that where it's beneficial, but there is that fear because we've got regulatory bodies looking over us, and especially with people with mental health difficulties, you feel that am I going to make things worse by sort of sharing my own experiences? And a lot of people are afraid of mental health still, even in the medical sector where perhaps that should be less of a problem. But have you found similar things where people have come with you with really traumas that they're still having difficulty letting go of?
Definitely, yeah. It's something I see on a regular basis. But again, the healing side of things, in my experience as a coach, is very much based around being honest. It's very much based around gaining the trust of the client and then holding space for them in whatever way they need you to hold space. But it's that innate trust. If you allow a client to trust you, that's half the battle. It's half the process.
Very few things can come from a place where there isn't that trust. And you'll either get misinformation or just get those barriers where you can't make the progress that they're looking for, I suppose. What is it that you do to, as you say, you don't post much on social media? Do you have a website? Is there a place that people can go to find you?
Yes, my website is a little bit cobwebby. It's not something I've really touched in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. I don't really take any. I have a submission form on my website, which I really don't take any clients from. I have a couple of reviews on there, but I have a Facebook page with around 1,000 followers. There's several reviews on there that people just do or don't leave. I don't chase people for that. Really is number one is word of mouth. It's recommendations. It's friends recommending friends or family members and getting the word out that way. And opening conversations with people. Quite a sociable person. I go to various different places. I'm always out and about. And, telling people you're a life coach is like, well, I need one of those. And that's a really big way to get clients as well. That if, organically, it's just opening conversations, just letting people know who you are and what you do.
That brings us on to another thing that you're thinking about is maybe podcasting or sharing your expertise and your knowledge and your experience to a wider audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's another way of giving, and I think giving is living. So you have so much to give in the world, but got to focus on which areas of your life you're gonna do it. If it's charitable or you're helping friends out, family, I like to give in some ways, but I've realised over the years, again, not to have this toxic resilience and to make sure that my own needs are met before I'm meeting the needs of others is so essential to be able to continue to do anything for any particular period of longevity. You've got to actually look after yourself to be able to deliver quality help to others.
Before we move on to a few quick fire personal questions, which we like to do, is there one bit of takeaway advice that you'd give to people? The most common bit of advice that you give to people when they come to you?
It's very difficult to give common advice, and this is one thing I've always struggled with as a life coach is standing up and giving a one shoe fits all period of advice. But if there was one, and if there is one, it's definitely look after yourself before you look after others. Like you said earlier, put your own oxygen mask on first. It's absolutely essential for your physical and mental health is to prioritize yourself as number one before you help anybody else.
As somebody who's got his own sort of history of mental health irregularities, there's definitely an element of of needing to do that, but the biggest barrier I found to being able to do that, and I think others probably share that, is a sense of selfishness. You want to be there present as a business owner, you want to be present as a father, as a partner, but a feeling of, I want to take an hour out or so, or to do some exercise or meditation when there's, the floor needs mopping or things need hoovering, just feels difficult. But I suppose what you're saying is that you need to find that permission in yourself to do that, because you're going to be detrimenting not only yourself but the people around you.
Definitely, and that's kind of where I help my own clients, is to face that sort of pseudo guilt they feel when they're taking care of themselves. And a lot of people think self-care is a hot bath with candles, but it's not. Sometimes self-care is what we don't do. It's like, self-care is not having 3 takeaways a week or having 2 bottles of wine at the weekend. Sometimes self-care is abstinence. Sometimes self-care is about what we don't do to ourselves rather than what we do. So there's a lot to consider in terms of ways we can self-care as well. People say to me all the time, well, how do I self-care? So it really isn't all about hot baths and self-help books. Sometimes it's about what you're not going to do to yourself.
Yeah.
It's taking away rather than adding sometimes.
Whether that's be sort of bad habits or bad relationships or...
Absolutely, yeah.
So we like to end our interviews or our conversations with a few quick questions. The most recent movie that you watched that you enjoyed?
The latest film I have watched was the new Saw film.
What, the Saw X?
Yes.
Was that a bit of a guilty pleasure?
It kind of is, yeah. It's kind of a toxic trait, isn't it? Horror films. I just think, in terms of, it's not your typical horror film where some poor young American teenage girl is running through a woods and trips over and gets murdered. It's got a little bit of a complexity to it. It's got a little bit of a darker psychology to it, and it makes for very good entertainment.
Your favourite band?
Favourite band? Oh, probably Fleetwood Mac.
Fleetwood Mac, oh my gosh. I know James Cracknell, the director of business development, is a big Fleetwood Mac fan. I always remember sitting in the office and more often than not, Fleetwood Mac be on. I think he's actually gone to see the tribute band up in Ipswich.
Oh, yeah. I know Stevie Nicks is going to do a UK tour soon, so that's quite appealing.
A book that you've got some good bit of advice from?
Kitchen Table Wisdom by Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen. She's an American physician, well into her 80s now. She wrote this book probably 30 years ago, and it was one of the first sort of self-help books I ever read. And it's one of those ones, it's full of short stories, inspirational short stories from her life through a therapy sort of perspective and a sort of physician's perspective as well. And it's just really, really nice. It's got lots of short stories, so you can pick it up, put it down, pick it up a year later, and you can just start off a new chapter. It's a book you can read chapter to chapter and break and pause in between. There's no sort of pressure to finish it. It's full of really, really good quality stories.
And maybe as a chef, this might be an easy question or a hard question, but a meal that you'd have on your birthday.
Funny, I was talking about this earlier. I'm quite a simple person in terms of I like really good quality food rather than really complex food. So like a really, really nice piece of steak cooked on a barbecue. And I think the important thing with celebratory meals is not really about the food. It's more about the company. You can have a great steak in a terrible restaurant with no atmosphere, and it feels very average. But you can have quite an average steak in quite a busy, fun environment, and it's all about, environmental factors rather than actually what you're eating as such.
Again, I suppose it's the life coach perspective coming through.
Yeah, the complicated perspective.
Yeah. We'll be sure to put the links to your cobwebby website and everything up.
And they've got a Facebook page which is available.
So just search for Jamie Lumsden on Facebook.
Jamie Lumsden Life Coach on Facebook, yeah.
Well, Jamie, thank you very much.
Pleasure, Adam. Thank you.
Really great to talk to Jamie, and I can say with certainty that he's doing great things in helping the people he speaks with. Also, it's just really nice to sit down and actually meet somebody in person rather than just being online. Up next, we've got a conversation that James had with Tom from Charlie Mike.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for joining us for one of our Interwoven Weave spotlights. People from the community, the opportunity for them to showcase their brand, talk a little bit about their journey, and direct us to what they're looking for in terms of customers and maybe that kind of next big step that they're aiming for. So today I'm really delighted to welcome Tom Steele from Charlie Mike. Tom and I met on a Essex Business Accelerator course, and it was a really great one. And he's been a part of the community with the Weave now for a few months. And so it's been really good to get to know Tom a little bit more and helping him and supporting him on that particular journey. So welcome, Tom. If you could tell us a little bit about Charlie Mike, the sort of work that you're doing, and maybe some of the people that you would really like to sort of kind of work with.
Yeah, so I've been a graphic designer ever since I can remember, really. In school, I was only ever good at art, and then I just did it at college, Harlow College, then went to uni at the Harlow building, and then worked in the marketing team at the college as well, like straight after. So it was just like a whole process from being a student all the way to working there. Then I left and wanted to go freelance. So I was freelancing for about 8 years. When I moved back to Harlow from London, I was trying to come up with a name for the company that linked to the area and Essex, really. And that's why I came up with Charlie Mike, because everyone on a daily basis in businesses in Essex always say Charlie Mike, because it's the, you know, the phonetic alphabet. It's the first thing they say, you know, when they're on a phone call. Oh, what's the postcode? Charlie Mike 18, Charlie Mike 21, whatever it might be. It's just stuck in people's brains, and it's been a real talking point. Even when I've spoken to you about it, you know, like you didn't quite get it at the beginning, and then
going back to the art stuff and the graphics sort of design things. What was it? Have you got a kind of a particular style that you like to associate yourself with when it comes to the graphic sort of design, or is there somebody that's been sort of kind of an inspiration in that journey for you?
I think my style is very much taking corporate and turning it into a little bit more artistic kind of thing. It's like that balance. So if you look at most of my work, it is very corporate-y looking. And I've always been good at doing, you know, brochure designs and all that kind of thing. And now I've gone into web design a lot more. The sort of general thing is sort of keeping it corporate, but putting that artistic twist and getting the messaging through the imagery and the graphics that the company needs. When it comes to like a sort of person I've looked up to be honest with you, someone like Ansel has been massive for me. My boss at my old college, Simon, he was huge for me. And even Muz, who was one of my teachers at the college as well. And taking little bits from all of those, you know, Muz was very much like a printmaker and old school design. You know, Ansel was more like he worked in the sort of corporate, you know, marketing world a little bit. And my boss was sort of like just a real good mentor, always giving me advice and sort of teaching me along the way. So it's been a bit of all of those rolled into one, really.
Is there a different approach in terms of style or way that you approach those two elements, the physical, tangible element of design within that print base and the website stuff? Do you feel like there's any difference in your approach, or do you find they're quite unifying in the way that you think about them?
I think it's a bit of both as well, because if they're reading a brochure, they're reading a brochure because they've picked it up, so they want to spend the time there. Whereas on the web, you don't really get that time to catch someone. So almost less is more on a website. And I'd say that's one of the main things that we're learning. I mean, we're about to redesign the Fruitco website and not have hardly any text on the homepage, literally just let the images sell it. And we kind of want that to be our big focus, is just the images and the clothing sort of thing. And I think each company is, you know, we're working with Ansel, he'll get those catchy lines that pull people in straight away. And that's straight on the homepage banner, maybe. Whereas a brochure, you can be a bit more in depth with it. Like I say, people are there because they've picked it up and they want to read it. So it's a bit of a different audience. And especially for mobile, like, was it 93% of website clicks now are through a mobile phone? So, you know, and it's not the biggest screen in the world. So maybe you can't have loads and loads of text, because then you've got to work for mobile and the desktop. You know, it's a fine balance really with all that.
Is there any particular company, organization, platform that you've worked on that you've kind of gone, yeah, that really showcases what we're about?
Well, I've been using Squarespace for pretty much like 90% of the websites I can create, because I don't know WordPress very well. And Squarespace is perfect for my client base, because if they want to go in and make their own tweaks as well, they can, because it's basically like Wix, but a way better version of Wix, and the sort of templates and things. It lends itself to my design, like really clean. And you go onto some of mine, and people are like, "Oh my god, you built that on Squarespace!" They can't believe it because they're so used to thinking, "Oh, WordPress back in the day," and it isn't like that anymore. So it's definitely Squarespace has been huge for us. There is the odd website, we've got a couple of Shopify's on the go that we're building at the moment. Fruitco's on Shopify that I manage, obviously. But yeah, Squarespace has been massive for us.
So what's the clothing brand that you're involved with as well?
Fruitco, obviously I'm wearing our new gilet that we're coming out this year, and behind me is all our hoodies and our joggers. So we're premium organic loungewear brand based around colour, and we design the fruit icons. Basically all the fruits are designed within a circle and made up of segments of a circle or little circles, which links back to the logo, because in the logo there's a little O with a little fruit on it. Our main thing is the fact that we wanted an inclusive brand that's ethical and basically that anyone could wear it, and it's just really, really good quality clothing. So we're sort of trying to go against fast fashion. And the fact that people just keep buying it and throwing it away within seconds, basically. And what we've learned doing it is that people are coming around to that now, and they actually really like what we're doing. And we are quite reasonably priced compared to other like organic and sustainable brands as well. Yeah, and we're growing it from Essex as well. So it's all Essex-based business.
Apart from showcasing ourselves or whatever, this is also about showcasing the kind of vitality and vibrancy there is in the region, and the initiatives and the work that people are doing to really create new ideas and work with them across it. I think it's really hugely important. Who would be your ideal kind of client that you'd be looking for?
Over the last year, I'd say trades have been really big for us. It depends what kind of client comes through the door, but mainly they're trades. Because my brother's been in that game for so long, he's been doing it for 25 years or something. He does groundworks with a big, big company. I think I've always had that link as well. My dad used to be a builder, that kind of thing. So I just naturally have done sort of trades.
And finally, how can people find you?
So you've got charliemike.co.uk, exactly how you would spell it normally. And so my email is hello@charliemike.co.uk, and you can pretty much find me on all social platforms. I update Instagram, seems to be the biggest one for me. I am on LinkedIn as well, so you'll find me on there. But my name's Tom still, so I get that a lot. I get called Charlie all the time, so which is fine. I don't mind. It's a conversation. That's great.
Such an interesting story and journey that Tom has been on, and his talent is clearly bringing him success. Really great to hear. We finish up this episode with a conversation James had with accountant Peter Disney. Now, don't worry if you find numbers a bit overwhelming, like I do. This conversation goes on a great journey which touches on so many aspects of running a business.
Absolutely delighted to be talking to Peter Disney. He's somebody I've known, I guess, for around about 11 or 12 years since I left the city and came networking within the region. One of the first faces that I came across in various networking groups. He's such a warm, hospitable person that it was a natural kind of conversation, and it was great to connect with him. But Peter is a chartered accountant who founded Wood & Disney. They're very much family orientated, and I love one of their areas or of their targets, which is around longevity, and it's getting those businesses to last and create value and do all of those things. So I'm hoping that the conversation will be able to explore a little bit about longevity and a little bit about what he looks for and how he supports those businesses. When we talk about longevity, you've been in business, I think, something like 40 plus years. Is that right, Peter?
Well, I qualified as a chartered accountant in 1981. So I probably started self-employment in about 83, 84. So then joined a guy called Philip Wood, and we ended up forming the Wood & Disney brand.
What brought you two guys together? Was it a common view? Was it a looking at your kind of skills?
So I started just doing some subcontract work for him. So I only had a very small business working from home. I needed to top it up with some other income. So I ended up doing some subcontract work for him and got on really, really well with him. It was just a natural meeting of minds. We were both interested in technology, which was pretty basic in those ancient days. We were using Sage accounting in those days, which was on 2 floppy disks. But we were really keen on using the technology. So that's what brought us together, I think, initially. And both very open-minded about what was happening to the profession and how it was changing.
When you started out, did you have a kind of a bigger vision for the future?
Absolutely no planning whatsoever. Absolutely no plan. I think just generally in those sort of days, it was the excitement of all the different changes that were coming along. Tax return software, that was really exciting. There were things were changing. So of course it was really difficult to perceive how the future would look. So I know that, we say to clients, what's your business going to look like in 5 or 10 years time? We really didn't foresee how quickly the software would take off and how things would change and how dependent on it. I mean, I think when I joined Philip, we had about 15 staff. But the technology over the years meant that we were able to achieve the same levels of turnover, but with fewer and fewer staff. We never perceived that at the time. We went with the flow. And I guess that's what most businesses do. Very few people have a proper vision of where they're going, or it changes very rapidly. Even now, I don't think I've got a particular vision of what we'll look like in 5 years' time.
It always struck me as a bit of a paradox is that when people talk about business planning, they bring a certain sort of kind of a discipline that says this is a projection of a pathway that we anticipate traveling. And sometimes that can put us into a channel, a funnel. But actually, what we really want to be able to do is bend and sway and move. So when you think about the lessons, maybe that some of the things that you've learned, because we've always speak about startups and we're very interested in starting out and startups and businesses that are looking at maybe a big sweeping change in their strategies or whatever in that regard. But when you look back and reflect upon the journey that you've been on, what would you say are the 2 or 3 key elements that you have been a party to that have kept that longevity going? And what kind of mindset do you think you have that has allowed that to happen?
I never saw accountancy as being build it up to sell. At that time, it was a supporting lifestyle for myself and my family. So as long as I had the time off to see my sons play football on a Wednesday afternoon, as long as I had the time off to be with them for evening meals, I was never sort of building something to sell on. It was very much, as far as I was concerned, this was going to keep me and my family into the longer term. So it was always about investing today for the benefit of the future. So we never balked at education. We never balked at the idea of going on a course or going to an event to learn something new. We never balked at investing in technology. We did all sorts of crazy things. I mean, we traveled to Chicago to see Michael Gerber. Do you remember Michael Gerber, the E-Myth?
Yeah, I do actually, yeah.
So I saw him on stage in Chicago. So that was probably in the late 80s, I guess, early 90s. Things like that, or looking for or seeing what was new, trying different software. It was always about, what we could do to keep the future there. I didn't want to let my family down. I wanted to support them into the long term.
Really interesting, because that kind of learning culture in a business, even today, I'm always amazed why it doesn't feature in more of that language of business, that learning culture. And when you think about it, it's not just your own development, it's the organizational development, isn't it? How your business learns, your employees, your staff, your customers, how the whole thing interacts with the learning culture thing. And I think when you think about it for the future, how do you feel that Wood and Disney have embedded that kind of learning culture into its environment now and preparing it for the next number of years ahead?
One of the key things we do with any new member of staff, so we've just onboarded a new member of staff, and one of the first things we do is connect them with our learning provider. So we're a member of a organisation which provides monthly tax webinars, for example, and in fact, literally you can probably attend 3 or 4 webinars every single month. As chartered accountants, we're obliged to do a certain number of hours. So let's say it's 40 hours in total, of which we have to do certain specified learning and certain unspecified or unsupported learning. So we tend to clock up at least 40 hours a year. I think last year I clocked up 50 or 60 hours of ongoing learning. And therefore, a new person coming on board immediately has to buy into that whole concept. So day one, we show them the platform. We help them start booking their very first courses to just start that whole process. And then, of course, we're monitoring it. So that portal gives me access so I can monitor that and make sure that people are doing what they say they're doing. And so I can see that they've actually watched the video. I can see, for example, that they might have booked on it, but if they didn't attend it, then it doesn't show up, or it shows up as a 0 time spent. So I can be on their back to make sure that they are learning and they are improving all the time. And I also have this view that occasionally we have blips when perhaps we haven't got any accounts to do. So the standard thing with everybody is, well, if you haven't got a job that needs to be done today, or you're not working on a specific job and you're scratching around for work, go and do one of the webinars, because you can look back, do a webinar, and that then gets added to your summary so I can see that you've done it. So, that type of thing is, I think, really, really important.
And I really like that, again, because that onboarding process, when you take people into it, it almost says to them straight away, does it not, that you're here to learn. It's part of the mandatory or statutory things that you have to do to be a part of that, but it's also invest very much in our culture within that area. So in terms of your team, how many people have you got working with Wooden Disney now?
There's 8 of us.
8 of you. Do you regularly come together, or do you find time to come together and share learning, share things that are happening within the business?
Yeah, probably not as much as we used to, because we're still operating on a hybrid basis. So it all depends on timing, when people are in, when they're not when they're not in. We do try, certainly a couple of times a month, to all be here. But in general, there's lots of conversations going on, whether that's by Slack and various things like that.
The challenges of the kind of modern day working environment, that remote working, do you see it as significantly beneficial, or just something which the organisation just can accommodate and not? Where do you see the real gains in it, and maybe where do you see some of the things that you would discourage or not like to see going forward?
I think it depends on the stage your various team members are at. Newbies, I think, need more connection. They need to be in the office more. They need to understand culture. Because if you're just working remotely, you're not getting that feeling of inclusiveness, of who do we trust in the office? Because working is all about knowing who to trust in your own environment. So who's the best at this particular job? If I've got a complex spreadsheet which needs pivot tables, who's the best person in the office to ask that? It isn't me, by the way, so that's okay.
When I look at remote working, I'm always thinking about how to counteract that sense of isolation through cohorted learning, through bringing people around different challenges, different events and things like that. So in terms of the industry that we all know and love, and that you rather said sounded not interesting, I actually think numbers and accountancy are fascinating. I fell in love with kind of what the narrative that numbers can create around a business, the things that you can unearth, the data that it stores and all the rest of it. Where do you imagine it's going to be in 10 years' time? Because, and you've stayed hugely relevant to the industry through technology, but we know that there are other things. Where's that future for you in that industry?
If I go back a bit, we sort of saw ourselves as being a technology company as opposed to an accountant, because having loved technology and seeing how it was changing, watching Xero and QuickBooks Online, all this stuff going on, we started thinking, well, we could be the accountants to companies anywhere in the UK. And almost inevitably, we started communicating more and more digitally and less human to human. And then I think it was 2017, we went to XeroCon in London, and that realization that our biggest competitors in the future will be Xero and QuickBooks, because they were spending hundreds of millions of pounds on machine learning, AI and the like. And their stated aim was to remove human error from bookkeeping. So it was absolutely blindingly obvious that we were going to be shut out of that equation, and that Xero and QuickBooks would be working direct for our clients. So that realization forced us to do a complete U-turn and go into the whole human-to-human communication and relationship, because we needed to talk to our clients more. And by talking to them more, we discover what their challenges are, what their goals are, what their personal goals are, and then we can start to help them properly with business advice. So I think the technology of Xero and QuickBooks are fantastic, but they're not perfect. So at the moment, they will continue to make mistakes, and our role becomes perhaps more forensic, almost more auditing, insofar as we're actually checking to see that the technology has put the stuff in the right place. So we're asking more questions. We're delving deeper into the technology, because the basic bookkeeping is being taken care of. Accountants are no longer bookkeepers. The bookkeeping profession will disappear, in my view. So our role is very much more forensic, more checking that it's right and that you can place reliance on that data, because if you take it at face value, then it may give you may make a wrong decision. So our focus now is the data accurate to make good decisions on? And if you can make good decisions on it, we will help you make those better decisions and help you grow your business. So our role is more advisory, using that data which we've already audited to make sure it's accurate and reliable. So yeah, in the future, it will be less bookkeeping, more interrogation, and more data analysis, I suppose, because you know as well as I do, it's very easy to look at some data and jump to conclusions without investigating further. And cash flow is one of the key things. I have never seen a cash flow forecast follow reality and be accurate. By the time you come to the end of the year, your cash flow's gone out the window. It was great when you started, but it's never accurate at the end. So our view then changed slightly, and we started doing this strategic cash retention and saying to clients, from the longevity point of view, if you wish to support your business, you've got to set aside every single year, ideally every single month, a certain percentage of your profit for the future. And that will show as an increased strengthening balance sheet and increased money in the bank. And then I started going down this whole routine of don't get cozy about cash. So don't keep it in your current account. And this stuff went back to when I was a kid. My mother collecting the wages from my dad every week, and she'd put it into different pots. So effectively, we do the same with our clients, and you have your corporation tax pot, your VAT pot, your fixed asset replacement pot. It just happens to be a bank account rather than a pot. So it's just good old-fashioned monetary supervision, really.
It's interesting because I was reading an article the other day about a rise in, and I don't think it's in small businesses as such, but in bigger businesses, for cash retention now to be significantly more. And people are starting to almost present it as an insurance policy, that runway, that ability to be able to stay alive if there's ever, a disruption in some aspect. And I guess that's people's perception that we've lived through COVID, we lived through a pandemic, we lived through an extraordinary set of circumstances which saw very, very profitable businesses disappear because of cash flow, because of the runway wasn't there, because of all of those different things. Is there a different sort of mindset to that advisory role that with your clients when you talk to them about cash management?
So we did an impact survey last year with some of our clients. And one of the biggest positives that came out of it was clients saying how much they understood about their finances, far more than they ever did in the past. So this sort of us educating them about the importance of cash, because one of the problems I think of running a small business is, running a company. But as far as you're concerned, that money belongs to you. And it's very easy to dip into that account, even though in fact it belongs to the company, it doesn't belong to you. So getting people into that mindset of, right, this money has to go here because that doesn't belong to you. You have to put your PAYE away. And if you're going to be bomb proof, you need to have 3 to 6 months worth of overheads, and trying to get people into that mentality. And sometimes just building that amount of cash up takes quite a while. It can take years. It's that same old thing, isn't it? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So every single month you're putting away that extra little bit. And yeah, I'm sure if you talk to some financiers and accountants, it will be, well, you're not getting a return on that cash. And actually, as a small business, you want that security blanket. You need that support. It's just not. It's all very well just looking at the numbers and going, oh, I'm only making a return of 3%. If I invested it in equipment, I could make 7, 10, 15. But there's more to it than that, isn't it? There's that whole attitude or feeling that I'm protecting myself and my family.
Yeah.
There's a different viewpoint. You're not a big company. You don't have to worry about the return on investment of this, that, and the other. It's your business. Therefore, if you choose to save that cash in your company for your future benefit, then that's exactly why you're doing it. I'm sure it was Warren Buffett who had the comment about most successful people are those people who can resist spending today and instead look towards the future. That's what I try to do with my clients, make them see that don't spend the money today, actually think about it and build the business that you want, but build it slowly. It'll be there for you in 20 years' time. The statistics at Companies House are appalling. Only 27% of companies survive more than 10 years, and only 10% survive more than 20. We need to break that cycle of rapid growth and failure.
We talk about a triad of acquisition, financial acquisition or cash acquisition, the business models that you employ, the kind of things that you're trying to do within that framework. Then management, as in KPIs, the reporting, being aware of the numbers, identifying bottlenecks, identifying leakages in the system, that kind of stuff. And then leverage within that financial leverage, which is not from the point of view of how much I can borrow, but what I can do with the money once I've got there. So that insurance policy element of it, very much, if I can keep 3 to 6 months worth of cash to cover overhead, should I need to either innovate and cannibalize what I'm doing today and actually modify that within the business model, or there's an acquisition that I might be interested in pursuing, which is may open up a whole new marketplace for me. But rather than have to rush out and borrow X thousands of pounds to fund an acquisition, I've now got the ability to be able to at least say, is it acquirable within that particular cash pot without damaging the rest of the business? So that kind of mindset of holistically looking at what you can do, and this is where I love money, because I love it as the fuel for the business to actually get us from A to B. And that recognition that, going back to one of the famous quotes, Simon Sinek, who said, we don't run a business to earn money, we run a business to achieve something. But money is the thing at the end of the day that will allow us to actually achieve that. And if we don't manage that effectively, then we're not going to achieve anything. We don't buy a car to put petrol in it. We buy a car to drive from A to B. Where do you see your career going from here?
I guess I have been lucky in that I've actually really enjoyed my work. I'm not looking forward to retirement. My role is almost certainly changing. I very seldom look at tax returns anymore. I very seldom review accounts other than a much more helicopter view, sort of just oversight really with the team. And one of the projects I'm working on is actually writing down my processes, the way I advise, the way I do things, so that they can replicate it. So, I have templates for my agendas. I have templates for the stages I go through on a review job or on a advice job.
What do you see as then the challenges for a lot of these businesses now, given technology, given AI, given lots of different things going forward?
Beware of this publicity that indicates that success is easy and you're entitled to it almost without effort. Whereas the reality is there are a few tiny successful cases who explode onto the scene and everyone goes, oh wow, if they can do it, so can I. But the simple reality is for most of us, it's hard work over a period of time. And in that period of time, don't get greedy. The clients who have felt entitled and have taken as much out as possible out of their companies are the ones who haven't succeeded in the long term. The ones, we now have a template with our clients, depending on the type of business and their turnover and the like, where we almost have a percentage that a successful company survives into the long term. That's how much the directors take out. That's how much the shareholders take out by way of dividend. So when we actually say to a client, right, for a company of your size, you should have only taken out 15% of gross profit. We work on everything on gross profit, not on turnover. And we say it should be 15% and they've drawn out 22, then we have something in black or white, which is saying you're drawing out too much. Because if you're drawing out 22 something else is suffering. And that might be the amount you're retaining in the company. You're not saving for your tax. That happens quite a lot. People draw out the money for themselves, don't save for the tax. It could be that, yes, you've done well in that your overheads are less than perhaps the standard would be, and therefore you're drawing that out. Yeah, but that might be a short-term issue. I then go into the explanation of how overheads are like steps, whereas your sales growth might be a line, and therefore at certain points in time, the difference between your overheads and your turnover is quite shallow, but then with the step going on, it gets big. So there's lots of stuff around it that I end up explaining. But the general principle of presenting somebody with a measurement, you say you like numbers, I like numbers, presenting them with something measurable and said, you're taking out too much, because then it's a realization. If I just went to you, James, you're taking far too much money out of your business, your reaction would be, sod off, that's my business. Whereas if I present you with numbers and show, look, this is what a successful company, which has lasted for more than 20 years, did at your stage of development, you're drawing out too much money, then it hits much, much harder.
And I think there's an element of that immediacy, that expectation that it's easy. That's a cultural thing, isn't it, for us? If you look at the world of social media, there is a whole kind of instant gratification model which says, I can create thousands of views just through creating a viral video, and that will generate X thousands of pounds and all the rest of it. And that's great, but it's not hard work. It's not what I would describe as I'm building something of value over a long period of time. And I think that's the bit, that longevity bit is there as well.
Thinking actually, James, that that word vision is a tricky one for small businesses to comprehend, because all the examples they are given by various coaches are always about the biggest companies in the world. Oh, IBM had this vision of this. Microsoft had this vision of a PC on every desk. But of course, you're not actually dealing with a vision that means anything to that small business. That small business may simply be, I want to be the biggest accountant in Langham Village. Well, I've probably achieved that. So, but the vision has got to be real to that small business who are never going to be an IBM, never going to be a Microsoft, but they have a vision that they want to support their family, that perhaps they want to create a business which will employ their family. So I was with a client earlier last year. I went to their 50th birthday of anniversary of their company. So when I first met them, which was about 25 years ago, I was dealing with the founder, who was in his 70s at the time. And his son, who was my age, was out on the road selling. He passed away. The business was run by the son. I worked alongside the son. And today I'm working with his son, so the grandson of the founder. And I went to this party, and there was a little boy on the dance floor, about 4 years of age. And the grandson said to me, "There's the future of the business." So he's already mapped out that he's working for the company. So, which is not a bad thing, but isn't it interesting how their view is totally future focused?
Yeah.
It's not on building what they can do today, but on the future, on that it will still be around to support their family. And there's lots of family members in that company. There's lots of, offshoot members of the family who all get a little bit of income and wages from that business. And it's supporting, this entire family, which is fantastic. Yeah.
It is. And I think everybody, when you're building a family business, is that kind of keeping that energy and excitement and aspiration, I think is really important. Like you said, I always describe myself as a 62-year-old entrepreneur with a 10-year plan. And I try very hard to keep that kind of process going. I'm sure next year I'll be a 63-year-old entrepreneur with a 10-year plan. But, I don't see myself ever, like you, retiring. I'm not a labourer. And that's where I get rarely challenged when I speak to a lot of people who are plumbers or builders or whatever. And I say to them, you've got to project yourself in the future somewhere. What are you going to be doing, and how can you manifestly change that direction in what you're doing? What are you going to be building that's going to be able to keep you going? Because, again, you don't want to be calloused and back-breaking work and all the rest of it. You want to find a route out of it. Sustainability is something you're pretty interested in anyway within the world of this, and you've made a commitment to the UN goal, sustainability goal?
That's obviously been influenced by my son doing what he's doing ever since A-levels, when he was doing environmental science and protecting the environment. And so we looked at that very seriously. In fact, he wrote some material for my website all about that arena.
More and more, every business has got to address it somewhere along their line within what they're doing, whether they're capturing their carbon footprint and offsetting it, or whether they're looking at other ways to develop some form of circular environment within what they're doing. I think there's more and more businesses looking at that kind of model, the business model around, well, what can I do if I lent into this industry and got this out of it? So I think that's circularity. And I had a conversation with a guy up in Edinburgh. This guy I met has a circular, I guess, an ecosystem of businesses within a business park. And the whole thing, every business feeds off each other, and the outputs of one business feeds into the outputs of another, and the waste of one business feeds into the inputs of another. And they designed this kind of whole almost landscape of these businesses in this particular area, and they record it, and they did that. So it's all kind of, different sustainability on the back of it. And I just think so much of that kind of stuff, which is really interesting in my head anyway. And I just think going forward, it's going to be more and more relevant in what we're doing. I'm just going to finish off the conversation with just a quick fire round, which I like to throw in. Last book you read that you really jumped out at you?
I bought this for my youngest son, but I ended up reading it. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger's latest autobiography. It's a self-help book, and I think it's called Be Useful. There's 7 habits or something he does. Yeah. But it's called Be Useful. And you can hear Terminator telling you what to do. Like, don't tell me you haven't got time to do this. So I worked out for 5 hours a day while bricklaying for 12 hours a day. It's actually a really practical guide to getting on in life.
Music or band that you most associate with?
I do prefer a bit of rock music, a bit of air guitar, stuff like that. So it's a bit more of my era, isn't it, really? So
final one, favourite food that you would like on your birthday?
I'm a traditional roast person, so a nice piece of beef and horseradish, and yes, the full Monty, really.
Full Monty. All right, excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Peter. And if people want to get hold of you, contact you, where's the best place for them to find out about you?
Obviously go to the website, which is woodanddisney.co.uk.
Really great conversation there, and I loved hearing how passionate Peter is about the work he does in helping his clients. Well, that's the end of this episode, and just a quick mention, if you want to be on the podcast and tell the people of our region about your business, or if you want to have a community that supports you, if you want a place to learn and develop as a business owner, then simply join our free community by visiting wearetheweave.co.uk. I've been Adam Roxby, Director of Communications here at The Weave, and I look forward to seeing you in the community.